Don't dare think I was going to slam his gavel down. Don't dare think I was going to. Good afternoon and welcome to the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission here in Clarksville, Tennessee. I'm Kurt Holbert. I'm the chairman of the Fish and Wildlife Commission. I'll be conducting the meeting today. We changed up the style a couple of months ago. Normally we did business on Friday, the actual final vote. Now we do it on Thursday and Friday. So we always did the pledge and the prayer on Friday only, since that was a full business day. But as chairman, that bothers me, so I think we should do the prayer each day, and the pledge also as well. So if you guys will stand, Commissioner Connie King is going to lead us in the pledge and then followed by prayer. Or prayer first, sorry.
Our Father God, we are so grateful for who you are and for your creation, and the fact that somehow we have found our way to be involved in an organization like this. We thank you that you give us direction, you give us some instruction, you give us help, and most of all, you love us and you love your creation, and we love you. Help us now to pay attention, to be able to make wise and thoughtful and good decisions. I also want to lift up our country, our nation in such a time as we're going through. We just ask for your help there and your leadership and your guidance. We pray all this in the name of our Lord Jesus. Amen. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Danette, would you call the roll, please?
Angie Box. Here. Jim Ripley.
Here.
Dennis Gardner. Here. Jimmy Granberry. Here. Steve Jones.
Here.
Connie King.
here.
Tony Sanders. Here. James Stroud.
Here.
Kent Woods.
Present.
Tommy Woods. Hank Wright. Here. Brian McLaren. Here. Kurt Holbert.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Danette. There are several special guests here today, and there's probably some that are not on this list. That's why I despise reading the list. I always leave somebody off. But we've got Mr. Clarence and Miss Laura Dyes from the Tennessee Fur Harvester Association from Lebanon, Drew Lashke from Tennessee Wildlife Federation, Joe McKinnon's here with Tennessee Farm Bureau, Terry Lewis with the Wildlife Federation in Corum, Miss Rosalind Carita, most of us know her as a former senator, Brad Cohen from Tennessee Tech, Mike Butler, Tennessee Wildlife Federation. We have Senator Bill Powers here with us today, and with him is Miss Elizabeth Ashwood. Director Carter, do you have any announcements? Just wondered how you'd take that. I hope he's watching. No, Director Wilson, do you have any announcements?
I just used to saying that. Just one thing real quick. Yesterday, the governor signed an executive order that created Asian Carp Advisory Commission. And just want to say that we don't know all the details of it yet. I think there'll be 10 members. The commission will have a membership on it. We'll have somebody on it. But it'll highlight and bring more attention to the Asian carp problems in Tennessee, and maybe hopefully this commission will come up with some ideas or help foster ideas to help prevent them and manage them and things like that. So I just wanted to point that out and say we're excited about it and look forward to working with them.
Thank you, Director Wilson. Senator Powers, we'll give you the floor to say a few words if you'd like. I'd like to say we appreciate you and appreciate your time, appreciate you taking the time to be here. And you represent a district that's got a lot of sportsmen and women in it, so but come up here and they can hear you online.
That's not where the voters are, you know. Let me just say I'm glad to be here, and more than that, I'm glad that y'all are here today. We're proud to welcome you. Connie and I are proud to welcome you to Montgomery County. I've lived here my whole life. I also I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Hank there. Hank's from Clarksville. He's I hadn't seen him in years and years, but he's also from Clarksville. But I took Mark Green's place about 1.5 years ago in the state senate, and before that I did 2 terms in city council here in Clarksville. I am a member of the Sportsman's Caucus. I've been to the last couple of dove shoots that they had. The last one was at, David, y'all help me here. David McMahon's farm, don't tell him. And before that, we went to a farm in Erin, which is also in my district. I have Stewart County, Houston County, and Montgomery County. And all I can tell you is I'm having a huge time. As it relates to Asian carp, I will say one thing about that. Asian carp entered the Tennessee waterways here in this area. It came originally, that way, and it's found its way down to Gunnersville, and now it's up in Nickajack and even past there. So I think whoever here is on this board and is going to be doing that, I wish you luck, and I'll be glad to give you my card, and please keep me informed, because I'm well aware of there's an economic impact and there's also an ecological impact. The ecological, these fish go through the water like whales do, gills wide open, sucking everything. They won't touch a hook. But they absolutely eat everything that the game fish like, and it is a travesty to these lakes. If you've been out there, we've got businesses closing up, bait shops, restaurants. The guides are moving to Center Hill. It's just been a real nightmare for this part of the country, and I do hope there's something we can do about it. I've talked to Chris Richardson about it at length, and so whoever one of y'all that's on that, I would love to talk to you and get with you and kind of give you my views on it. But other than that, welcome to Clarksville. We're certainly glad to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Powers. At this time, I'm going to call on Rosalind Carita. If you would come up, I think she's going to give us some information about an event here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to invite all of you, as well as all of you, October the 24th, here in Clarksville, we are going to dedicate the Nature Center to Wade Bourne. And I feel sure that many of you know Wade or knew Wade. This is not a fundraiser. This is come and honor your friend. It is going to be October the 24th at 2 p.m., and you will receive by email this invitation, but it is at Rotary Park, which is 2308 Rotary Park in Clarksville. So it will be a wonderful moment to remember your friend. We have one exhibit that is totally dedicated to Wade, and the purpose of the Nature Center is to do on a similar idea to what you do, and that is to promote conservation, education, and get people outside so that they can enjoy our environment. So I wanted to invite you and also bring you greetings from Mayor Durrett, who could not be here to welcome you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rosalind.
And I did just want to mention, that wasn't Mark Green's seat, that was my seat.
That's right. One guest I did leave off. I wrote it on a different piece of paper, but the Campbell County Mayor's here, Mr. E.L. Morton. Appreciate you making the drive over. I know you're going to speak in a little while to that. But anyway, all right. I'm going to call on Joe Benedict, our wildlife. No, I'm not. Hold on, Joe. I got one more thing that's not on the agenda that I was about to forget. Jennifer Wisniewski.
Hey, you got it. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about a really cool program one of our officers came up with. Andy Collins over in Region 4, he and Shelley Hammond came up with this pink patch that you've all got in front of you. And we are going to sell this pink patch in our new e-store along with that hat that you see, that's the patch on hat. And all of the funds that are raised from this is going to go for Casting for Recovery. So we'll sell this all October long for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and at the end we'll give Casting for Recovery hopefully a great big check to take women who are recovering or have recovered from breast cancer fly fishing. So it's a really exciting new program, so just wanted to let you guys know what was going on.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now, Joe Benedict, our Chief of Wildlife and Forestry. Keep saying it, Joe. Keep saying it.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. This is an exciting presentation for me to give, along with some humor, apparently. As we all know, partners, we have a multitude of partners that work with the agency that help us complete our mission that we have. And today's recognition is no different than that. And partners have a multiplication effect on the efforts and the work that we do and the funding that we have. And so I'm pleased today to talk about two partners and recognize them. Because of the COVID restrictions and the distance for this meeting for them, we did this remotely, although one of the recipients is here in the audience. Let me just give a little background on this recognition. This is for an elk reward contribution. And so most of you all here in the room and watching us know about our elk research project that we have with the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. We have elk that are radio collared, and we've got graduate students following them around, learning about their food habitats, where they spend their time, in hopes of better managing them. Part of those radio collars have what's called a mortality switch, and it's kind of a morbid word, but the way it's a time sensitivity switch in there. And so when an elk lays down, if they normally sleep for 8 hours a night, which I have no idea if that's close, but the sensor might go like 9 hours, right? And again, that's just an example. So the UT folks got a mortality switch announcement that said, hey, this certain elk has been laying still for way too long, way more than an elk would normally lay down for. And so they went and found the animal, and they actually found out it had been shot, right? So it was been poached. And so within a couple hours, is what my sources tell me, the two groups that we'll recognize here in a minute, were called the agency and offered money for a reward to find the folks that killed this animal. So just appreciate their contributions, but the timeliness was something that I thought was important to mention as well, the quick response. So the first recipient of the recognition award is the National Wild Turkey Federation Pine Mountain Longbeard chapter of Campbell County. So this is what the plaque looks like. I got a real fuzzy picture of the plaque, so I don't have the plaque, but this is what the plaque says on it. So the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency presents this award of recognition to the NWTF Pine Mountain Longbeard chapter of Campbell County in appreciation for their assistance and support of the Tennessee Elk Program. And again, they provided financial assistance to make the reward for information leading to the identification of the folks that poached the animal. And again, they were within a couple hours. They called us, they gathered the money, and they said, "We've got this money. We want to provide to you." So here's a picture of the folks that came. They're in Region 4. John Mike is in the middle there, and then Billy Ball is the chair of that chapter, so he's in the middle there. And some of their chapter members and agency employees are there. So I want to give a huge shout out to that chapter for their dedication to this important resource in Tennessee. And the second group that was part of this, my understanding is it was a joint contribution, but they each pulled their weight there. The Campbell County Outdoor Recreation Association, or CORA. And so Mr. Terry Lewis is here. We weren't sure that he was going to be here to receive this, so he actually and other members of CORA received the award again from John Mike in Region 4 there. So here's a little close-up of both of those gentlemen receiving that award for their group. So just want to thank them for their partnership. The folks were located who poached the elk and were taken care of as far as that goes. So just want to thank both CORA and NWTF chapter for their contributions that made the finding of these folks a success.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to call on our Assistant Chief of Wildlife and Forestry, Wally Akins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. My name is Wally Akins. I'm the Assistant Chief of Wildlife and Forestry Division. I'd like to give you today a little update on the latest occurrences that's happened with our division and with our waterfowl areas. Look, particularly Region 1 WMAs that we have food crops planted. Also look at some statistics of our August deer hunt we just had last month, and also an update on CWD. As y'all know, we've had an unusually high amount of rainfall this summer. In July, this is some totals of we're close to 200% above the normal rainfall levels of a 30-day period. And as y'all know, some of these trends have lasted on into August and into September. Because of the rainfall, it has caused us some issues on our waterfowl areas. Some of these issues we've been able to overcome. Some we have been just opportunistic to make the best out of a bad situation. And I think we have in a lot of cases. These rains have delayed our plantings. Sometimes they've eliminated or prohibited our plantings. And sometimes we've had to replant several times, up to 4 times in some cases, or a last-ditch effort would be to plant millet in place of a failed corn crop or buckwheat or milo or something like that. So we have adapted as we could in most cases. I'll give you some general observations for different regions or within Region 1, different areas. And if y'all have questions about particular WMA, I do have some slides hidden with exact numbers, but I'll just give you some generalities. Kentucky Lake units are the best is first. Our Camden area had a banner year. They've had 225 acres of corn with some other crops, chufa and buckwheat, and excellent moist soil units. Big Sandy, they didn't have any crops this year. They've had a levee breach that's been repaired by our heavy equipment crew. At Gin Creek, we've had some problems with the pump. We had a bearing and the shaft was bent. I think they've got a crane rented for tomorrow actually to replace that pump, as well as some issues with the ditch silting in. They've also got that excavated out and cleaned out for better drainage. West Sandy and Horns Bluff, it has flooded twice this year, and our corn crops have failed. They've pumped it out, dried it out, and planted back with millet, so we've got 40 acres of millet there. We've also had some issues with army worms that were detected pretty early and was able to get in there and spray those for some control. Barkley, we've got 200 acres of corn and millet and some managed moist soil units. They've had to plant that corn 3 times and also battle some army worms, but they've overcome some problems there. Also, they have some pretty good moist soil units at Barkley. Lake Lauderdale, we have 80 acres of corn, and according to the crews out there, some phenomenal moist soil units. Have about 75 acres of those units at Lauderdale. Moving on to Upper and Lower Obion River, WMAs, a lot of the similar issues have held true there as well. Obion River, Hop-In, Refuge, and Gooch have struggled mostly compared to the other units. They've had floods 4 times this year, with the latest being around the 1st of the month, 1st of September. They've been able to dewater these areas, replant the corn that failed back to millet. At Hop-In, we've got 80 acres of rice that did survive the flooding. We also had a sharecropper that normally plants around 200 acres of soybeans. That crop had failed, but because of the high waters, they've been able to manage for moist soil plants and moist soil vegetation there. At Gooch, they since the last flood in September, they just decided to hold that water, close the gates, and retain that water. It has created some shallow water areas and some moist soil units throughout that WMA. Manna Swamp, we didn't have much flood damage there. We've got 50 acres of corn and some rice. Pagoda, we've had large amounts of rainfall, and the crops reflect it. They're struggling out there. But we do have pretty good moist soil units at Pagoda. They do have 63 acres of corn, 70 acres of moist soil units. Thorny Cypress hadn't had many problems. They've got 130 acres of corn, some Japanese millet, as well as moist soils. White Lake Refuge is another area that's had repeated flooding, but they've also had some rapid drying, and they've been able to get that main lake area dried out and planted in millet, as well as some corn and almost 200 acres of good quality moist soils. The Mississippi River and Reelfoot units have probably been least impacted. Eagle Lake and John Tully and Fig Field units 1 and 2, they've had no flood damage to report. Eagle Lake Refuge has almost 300 acres of corn, 260 to be exact, 70 acres of moist soil units. The Fig Fields, Unit 1 and 2 on Tully, 200 acres of good moist soil and 150 acres of corn. Black Bayou Refuge, all units there, they have 150 to 160 acres of corn, which looks really good. 50 acres of Japanese millet and 140 acres of moist soil units that look awesome. Here's some pictures just to kind of give you an idea. Gin Creek up there, upper left, is the ditch that was excavated out. The flood waters of Big Sandy that were never really under control all year. Our good corn crop at Camden, and some volunteer millet, Japanese millet there at Lauderdale, and the moist soil units. Couldn't resist, it's not the best picture up on upper left, but throw that in there with the tractor in the water. That's at Hop End where they've replanted the millet. You got the corn at Black Bayou and the moist soil units at Obion River or Gooch WMA. I'll move on to our August deer hunt unless anyone has any questions about the waterfowl areas.
Commissioner Gardner?
Could you elaborate on what you mean when you say manage for moist soil? Is that,
Yeah.
you said volunteer Jap millet, but what else does that involve?
Right, there's a technique to moist soil management, and that's where you can manipulate the water by a slow drawdown or a slow raise of water, which encourages a lot of those moist soil plants. And by that I mean barnyard grass, the polygonums, which are in the smartweed family. It's a food crop for ducks. And you stimulate that growth and then manage that water level to not overtop them, not flood them out, but allow them to grow. Some of the moist soil areas have actually been fertilized and sprayed to control undesirable weeds. So, a lot of times you can get up to around 2,000 pounds per acre of food for ducks. And to be honest, sometimes that's better than anything we can plant, on our own.
Any other questions? Mr. Granberry?
Yeah, this summer, Jennifer posted a photograph of some red and orange sunflowers. Is there any difference between traditional sunflowers, or is that just a aesthetics issue?
It's probably an aesthetics issue. Normally on our WMAs, we plant the Paradovic or the black oilseed sunflowers. Some folks plant the Clearfield sunflowers, which are especially treated to withstand a certain kind of herbicide. So I think it would be an aesthetic thing to have just a different color. Yep.
All right.
Okay, I'll move on to the August deer hunt. Like I said, it was just completed. Whoops, went the wrong way. Sorry about that. This report includes all reported deer, which are assumed to be male deer since it was an antlered-only hunt. However, we could have a few antler does in the mix, but these are all the deer reported in the harvest. The overall statewide harvest increased by 29% as compared to last year, 2019, and the statewide total was only down 4% from 2018, and I don't have that on the screen. The harvest in Unit CWD was up 155% as compared to last year, with a 315% jump from 2018. So that's a good thing. Harvest outside of Unit CWD increased by 14%, but was still down 20% in 2018. Here are some numbers that reflect those totals, those percentages. Our CWD sampling for this hunt, as of yesterday, we had about 97 deer sampled, which is about 58% of the harvest. We do expect a few more samples to come in. I think there's a few still at the lab, and we expect some more deer to trickle in as hunters bring in deer to taxidermists. So, we'll probably be over 100 before it's all said and done. We have had, out of these 97 deer sampled, 8 positive for CWD, 6 in Fayette, 2 in Hardeman, but 1 was not a hunter-harvested deer, but a roadkill in Fayette County. Chronic wasting disease, several points to make with this and our efforts to control this. We've got a digital marketing campaign that kicked off last Monday morning through our outreach and communications division. We're using social media, geofencing, and our target audience in most cases are hunters that's harvested a deer in the past or presently in a lot of the West Tennessee counties. Also, certain counties in Arkansas and Mississippi as well, so they will automatically get some digital ads and emails regarding CWD. Also using billboards and radio spots for our marketing efforts. Facebook Live meetings, we had our first one yesterday at noon. It lasted about an hour. These are an opportunity for the public to ask us questions and for us to provide feedback to them during the meeting and also before the meeting and afterwards as well. I've had a lot of press releases regarding these live meetings, or some press releases, and some of the other conservation groups have exhibited a lot of chatter, encouraging others, the public, to participate in these meetings. We got a new sampling facility that we're trying to get a lease agreement finalized and us able to move into it in October, looking at around the middle of the month. It's in Jackson near the interstate and also right beside a FedEx facility. This new facility will increase our capacity and our efficiency to process samples, get them shipped off to the lab. And also with COVID, it's a place that's much larger than what we're currently using. So for safety reasons for our employees and field staff, it's just a better place to work and operate. Disposal, we're carcass management this year. It will be at Chickasaw WMA State Forest with assistance from our portable incinerators. Right now we only have one incinerator operating. It's at Custom Processing. The manufacturer, however, is looking at our second incinerator, try to get it up and running to assist us with these efforts. Hopefully that'll be happening fairly soon. Density monitoring will begin January 21st. This is conducted on a fixed-wing aircraft using infrared imagery. We've contracted this effort out with a private company. We're going to use this in spark areas and also in the core areas of CWD to give us a baseline prevalence of CWD in the herd. We're going to start this year, as I said, and conduct it annually with hopes to make it a permanent project. Targeted removal is one of the best management practices to control CWD in newly infected areas to decrease deer density and also the rate of spread of CWD. This also is going to begin January 21 with collaborative efforts with USDA Wildlife Services. We've received a grant recently for a trained canine detection of chronic wasting disease. This is in collaboration with Colorado State University and the National Wildlife Research Center. We anticipate to begin this research and these field exercises in Tennessee late winter of this year. That's all I have regarding an update on agency activities. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer.
Commissioner Gardner?
Do you have any numbers on attendance for the Facebook Live meeting yesterday yet?
You know, I was watching that meeting, and Jennifer, yes, you would know better than I. It was several hundred, I'll venture to say.
Yeah, so anywhere between 100 and 175 people at any time.
Any other questions? All right. That got you done?
Yes, and if I may, I would like to
Yes,
introduce.
go ahead and introduce our next speaker.
I will like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Brad Cohen, but before I do, I want to recognize the student chapter at Tennessee Tech. They were mentioned previously, but they participated in the Legislative Sportsman's Caucus dove hunt this year. So recognize the student chapter there and that group that's helped us out on a lot of different things. So, but I would like to introduce Brad Cohen. Dr. Cohen is a professor of wildlife ecology and management at Tennessee Tech. He received his PhD from University of Georgia under Carl Miller, focusing on white-tailed deer management and deer disease. He stayed at the University of Georgia for his postdoc, working with Dr. Michael Chamberlain. So he's worked with several notable people, examining the questions related to wild turkey ecology and management. His research focuses on answering applied questions to assist in agency management of mainly game animals. He works on a lot of wildlife GPS studies with focus on habitat selection and effects of wildlife on wildlife populations. He's also worked on other TWRA-funded projects, including the Deer Management Unit delineation and deer population modeling. Thank you, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you, Wally. And thank you all for having me today. As Wally mentioned, I'm going to be kind of giving you an update of the Mallard Telemetry project. Now, understand we're only really at the very beginnings of the project. You know, if it was a story, we're more at finishing the prologue than we are actually writing any real chapters of substance yet. And so hopefully in the upcoming years, I actually get to tell you the real story. But I think there's enough here in year one to at least begin to tell you some interesting findings. And let me just, for those, I know most of you are familiar with the background on this project, but let me just kind of put you in the right headspace of how we got here to even fund a project like this. It began with talking to the biologists and managers out in West Tennessee and the consistent questions that they had of how ducks moved and were distributed up and down the Mississippi floodplain and the tributary rivers, the Obion, Forked Deer, and Hatchie river systems of West Tennessee. And hopefully if we can understand how they move and what habitats they select for and how they're distributed, we can improve our management systems. Let me give you a more philosophical approach, right? What actually is affecting how ducks move along a landscape? If you were just to think about it, obviously the first thing we do as managers is we go, okay, food. Ducks are here in the winter, let's put food out. But food isn't all the same. Some food is better than others, if you will. So it's not just food, but instead the type of food and also the quality of that food. For example, we talked about moist soil before when Wally was discussing, and another one is flooded unharvested corn. Both offer different scenarios to ducks. Well, it's great to have that food there. We first have to make it available to ducks. You need water. So the other thing that affects where ducks might be at any moment in time is water in the system. Now, not just water in a flooded impoundment, but also when we get precipitation and move water over the banks of these tributary systems, these river systems, and flood new areas. How do ducks move and recognize that? The other thing is they have to kind of access this food while not getting shot. So hunting pressure certainly is playing some role in how ducks are distributed across the landscape. You combine that with like just waterfowl density, the more we have, the more visible they would be. You get some idea of how ducks are moving and how they're selecting in West Tennessee. But here's the interesting thing. TWRA can control 3 of those 4 scenarios. You can figure out what food, you can figure out how much water, and you can manage hunting pressure. And in the end goal, we're trying to get more waterfowl density to hopefully meet the needs of our constituents. So general questions for this project are somewhat just straightforward. Where are ducks going? What are they selecting for? We have a lot of refuge designated in state-owned property where we don't allow our constituents to access it during the winter. What role do those refuge areas play in the waterfowl ecology in West Tennessee? Can we give constituents some form of access to those properties? How would it affect waterfowl? And then how are mallards moving and trading back and forth along these river systems? So I'm not going to go heavy into methods. If you have any questions afterwards, I'm happy to answer it. But let's just get the basics. First thing we got to do is we go out and we catch ducks. We put a little GPS transmitter on their back, like a little backpack, and we send them off. Those are solar panel GPS transmitters. They're charging right now as we speak, hopefully, and those ducks are up in Canada. They give us about a location of where that duck is right then and there, about every 2 hours. We're catching males, females, juveniles, adults. We're getting the whole sample. What we're doing that's really unique is we're not just categorizing like, hey, there is food out there, but we're actually doing on-the-ground assessments of food type and quality. So every week or every other week, depending on the technique, we're going out there and saying, what is available to ducks? Now, I mentioned habitat availability is not just, hey, there's food, but there has to be water. So we're conducting aerial flights to figure out where water is on the landscape so we can figure out if ducks are chasing new water or new resources. I mentioned those aerial flights a second ago, and they also kind of give us an opportunity here. Now, while we're flying, hunters out in West Tennessee like their blinds, and they have a very specific type of blind they like. They like a box blind with some oak leaves tucked in, and I don't know, this is the most camouflaged one we saw, and it's right there. And what we can actually do is check a GPS location as we fly of all the blinds, and now we have some density of where hunters are on the landscape. But that doesn't tell just the whole story, because in order for it to be risky to a duck, it's kind of got to be hunted. So we can also look for, you can't really see it great, but there's spinning wing decoys out there. And we can use those as a surrogate of like, it's actively being hunted. So it's not just a blind on the landscape, there are hunters in there. Now, in the landscape of hunting pressure, let me tell you that there's places where there are no hunting pressure, right? There's refuge. And we mentioned before, state refuge areas are a significant part of the landscape of West Tennessee. And the question, when you talk to constituents, when you talk to managers, is what is the role of these refuges? What can we do? Is there anything we could do to open up use to our constituents? And I'm not just talking hunters. I'm talking, could we allow birders to come out and look at waterfowl? Could we open up any type of access that would even allow any constituents use of this area? So what we're doing at the same time we have GPS transmitted ducks on the landscape is we're going into these refuges and doing different types of disturbance. And then we're tracking those ducks after the disturbance happens. So we can tell, here's what happens. Does it affect survival? Does it affect movements, etc.? So let's get into the meat and potatoes of kind of our first year findings. We deployed GPS units on 127 mallards. That was a lot of work and a lot of fun in hindsight, not at the time. But 66% of those were males, 33% of those were females, most of them were adults. Interestingly enough, only 8 were killed by hunters. I'm going to show you videos, and I don't know how well they'll come up for the commissioners, how far away they are, but let me just kind of describe how ducks moving around West Tennessee. They're following those tributaries back and forth, and they have relatively high sight fidelity to within a tributary system. In other words, those are GPS marked ducks that you see moving around during the winter. And they're just going back and forth, east and west, up and down either the Obion or the Forked Deer or Hatchie. And they're holding tight to those refuge areas and then trading back and forth in private land. Let me tell you some more interesting things. We did not see what we expected as far as large-scale movements of ducks across state lines. These are like kind of Tennessee ducks. They don't really cross over the Mississippi River. In fact, we only had 3 instances of our ducks at all crossing over the Mississippi River this whole entire first year until they migrated. They didn't cross state lines until they started to migrate. They didn't go to Kentucky. They didn't go down. to Alabama or Louisiana or anything like that. So, I don't know. Once they get here, they like something. Now, this is zoomed in of the Obion River complex. I kind of put out there the refuges so you can see them outlined, but what I want you to notice is two things. Those ducks are just trading back and forth amongst the refuge systems, and then once they kind of get into a new refuge, they're just trading back and forth between a couple private lands. They show really high site fidelity to these refuges. That one in the blue and hop in right now, these were caught in bean switch. He's the traveler of the group. You're going to see his dot eventually disappears. He got shot. He was a little too adventurous for this place. All right, so then speaking of just getting shot, let me tell you right now, it's a risky place to be a duck if you're in West Tennessee. There are blinds everywhere. Anyone that's hunted out in West Tennessee can tell you that. But what's surprising is that when we do those aerial flights, on a Saturday, that's December 7th, there was a Saturday, when we did one of the flights, we found that 93% of those blinds that we saw had spinning wing decoys in them. So 93% were being hunted. 10 days later, on a Wednesday, 80% of the blinds that we saw were being hunted. That one hit me a little hard. I could get the Saturday, but Wednesday, So this speaks to why we see what we see regarding refuges. At least for that first month, what you're looking at is daytime and nighttime use. And just notice that, okay, they already spend more time during the day on a refuge than they do at night. But also it's seeming that from December to January, they had relatively high refuge use. About 50 to 60% of their time was spent on a refuge. But that declines from January through February, and if you actually look at our data, we have real-time assessments of food in those areas, we know that that's correlated very strongly with depletion or complete eating out of a refuge. So basically, once the food's off the refuge, they start to make more excursions outside of it. Speaking of eating out, the refuge of all of its resources, one thing that Wally kept alluding to was how many times we seem to want to plant corn even though it's not going to make a crop. And what was interesting is we're surveying all of these flooded, unharvested cornfields that is a really important management practice in West Tennessee. And what we found is that we thought all the corn would be eaten out relatively early, but by the end of winter, there were still 70% of our fields that had corn on them. So when you went and looked at the field, there would be patches that were eaten out, but there was still a lot of corn. And that graph looks fancier than it actually is, but really what we're seeing is that there's a really strong correlation between the probability of a single ear of corn being eaten and how far it is from the water. In other words, it's not enough to just plant corn and put water on. You've got to be able to flood that water up to at least 1.5 feet close to the ear of corn. Otherwise, that's not duck food. So then the ducks left. They headed out and they went kind of north and then west. Some of them went to prairie potholes, and some of them, surprisingly, went to Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota. That path is not what we expected. We expected them to go right over to the Dakotas and then go maybe up into Saskatchewan. They're staying further east than we expected. And they were kind of they started to leave in March 1, and were kind of trickling up in waves. By about April 1st, most of our ducks had all but left. Here's where they are right now. Those purple dots each represent a duck that we have checking in with us once a week. And I want you to notice just how spread out these ducks are and how crazy it is. These ducks were in a small location in Tennessee and now are spread out across the continent. They are everywhere from Chicago all the way up to northern Alberta. And if you look at their movement paths right now, they're getting ready to start their autumn migration. They're hopping around in fields. They're getting ready to come back down. And what's going to be really exciting is to see where they wind up again. So let me just acknowledge real quickly that I get to come up here and talk to you about this, but there's the 3 students that are actually doing the research. There's Corey Highway, the master's student on the project, Nick Masto and Abby Blake Bradshaw, the PhD students on the project. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gardner, you got a question? Been calling on you first every time.
I just want to say that's fascinating, and I'm glad you're here to report on this. I'm a lifelong duck hunter, and I love to see this information. The correlation to the ear of corn and the depth of the water always makes sense to me. My the place I hunt. I can see where some corn doesn't get eaten, and you can see where they eat up to the point they can reach, and then a little bit at the top they can't get to. But I just want to say that this is a great project, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. It's amazing. Thank you.
That means a lot. Thank you so much.
And I just want to let you know, I took part one day going up there to help with the study.
Good, and we appreciate you
Got to catch
coming.
ducks in the cage and attach the backpacks. It was awesome.
Oh, so you were there for one of the successful
there
days.
one
That's
day,
always a
yes.
good feeling.
Yeah, it was good.
The invite goes out to all the commissioners. If you would like to come and catch ducks with us, you're more than welcome.
It was awesome. Thank you for your research. I'm looking forward to this today, see where they are. So
Thank you so much.
All right, Commissioner Wright?
Quick question, are there additional ducts that are going to be, have transmitters affixed, or is it, are we done with that?
That's a great question. So the question was, are there going to be additional ducts that we put units on? And the answer is we're putting out 120 units a year for the next 2 years. So we'll be having a lot of data, and in particular for the disturbance, the numbers are critical.
Commissioner Gardner?
I saw all the blue dots up in Canada and Chicago and everything. That didn't look like 127. What do you have now?
So we have about 60 to 70, give or take. It's been as low as 40 that check in. It just depends on how the solar panel's doing. Sometimes these birds were nesting, and when they go to nest, the females kind of get in the thickest vegetation ever, and so the battery dies and we lose them. And then some of them come back online. So it's an ever-trading number, but right now we're about 60 to 7 of the 120. Some died on the way up through migration, some died while they were nesting, some the battery just died and we never heard from them again.
So do you attribute that to a reliability on the transmitters you're using, or I mean, and are we looking at that? Is there another route we can go to make them more reliable, where you don't get that that loss there?
Do you see the gray hairs I've gained since the beginning of the project?
I
That
do.
question, you're supposed to say no. The question, that question is something that has kept me awake at night of how we can make them better, especially in West Tennessee. These are solar charging units, and yet every day in West Tennessee during our field season seems to be cloudy, and ducks love, mallards love flooded timber, and all of a sudden charging issues are something that we had to address. And what we did was we actually went and created a captive mallard facility. We went and got captive mallards, and we tested every different design of GPS units we could, and we have a custom order coming from the company of a specific unit for us that's got twice the charging capabilities as the one beforehand, and so hopefully we've addressed that.
Okay, and then one more follow-up to that. The one that is nesting in dense cover,
Yeah.
and the battery goes completely
Yeah.
dead, when they get back out and they have their brood and they're able to charge, will it recharge? And it does. Okay.
So that's a great question. Yeah, just so everyone heard that. Will they recharge after they've gotten to zero? And the answer is yes, they'll recharge. They do lose a little bit of their potential. Every time you drop them to zero, the battery loses a little bit more potential, but they will charge back up. Yep. I just have to say that some of those ducks, our ducks, are in the area in Canada where I hunt, and I am very upset about not being able to go there this year to get them.
I'm not, because that means more of them to come down here.
That's right.
I hear you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Granberry?
If somebody harvests a duck that has a transmitter on there, is there any kind of reward?
There's no reward per se, a monetary reward. What we do is we give them a replica of the GPS unit and a map of all the mallards' movements up until that point. So that's their quote-unquote reward for telling us.
So
these
you're
ducks,
encouraging them to...
the best we
Good,
can. It's
right.
very important that they get the unit back to us. We're happy to give them like the replica for a mount, and if we can get that unit back, we can redeploy it on another duck.
Plus you get the data where they harvested it.
Yeah, and keep in mind these GPS units are live, so we know if it's in the back of someone's truck driving to Nashville, let's say, right? So it's
It's a fast duck.
yeah, we've seen a couple of ducks parked in the back somewhere. So
Any other questions? All right, Brad, thank you for being
Appreciate
here.
you.
And I'll have to say this is one of the best investments I've been involved in as a commissioner, and it's pretty awesome as a duck hunter and being from West Tennessee to see where these ducks go, and being to Canada, like you say, and seeing where those ducks end up compared to where you've been and how close they come back to home. But I'm excited nobody's going to be shooting them in Canada, I have to admit, so, since I'm not up there. But anyway, and they do have a better chance of getting back here this year.
They
So,
do this year.
anyway, thank you for being here.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to do one more and then we'll take a break. I'm going to call on our Assistant Director, Chris Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. In conjunction with kind of, I guess, the Labor Day holiday, I know there were some questions, concerns kind of surrounding our boater education requirements and laws in Tennessee that I saw email traffic. I think Commissioner Granberry and Commissioner McLaren, Commissioner Ripley, and others were all. So I wanted to kind of provide a legislative history, if you will, of kind of how the current state of the law got to where it is, because it's an issue that has been considered by the General Assembly in 2 out of the last 3 years. If you rewind all the way back to when mandatory boater education became law in Tennessee, was 2005. At that time, we said anyone born after January 1st, 1989 is going to be required to pass a proctored exam along with a course to teach boater safety in Tennessee. If you're a Tennessee resident, you're required to take that course. There are some exemptions in addition to the age requirement, which is January 1st, 1989. Certainly, if you're a non-resident, we will honor other NASBLA-approved boater courses. But even if you have passed one of those in another state and you relocate to Tennessee, you're still required to take our test, because we require a proctored exam, and certain other NASBLA-approved courses are not proctored. We want to make sure that the individual that is being certified is the individual that's actually taking the test. So that makes ours a little bit unique. In 2005, as with any other kind of, if you think back to making seatbelt primary, or you think back to some of the other mandatory requirements that have been put in the law, there's always different parties with different concerns. And at that time, one of the major concerns was from marina owners associations and others that rent or lease vessels. And the concern was that if we have this mandatory requirement for boater education, that it's going to have a negative impact on their business. So in 2005, there was an exemption put in for anyone who rents watercraft does not have to have completed the boater education course. They were required, or are required, to get a daily or day of safety briefing and orientation on the vessel, and that was incumbent upon the marina owner. Fast forward to 2018 was the first time that I really got involved or learned anything about the nuance of that exemption for renters of watercraft. And actually, in our budget hearing, the late Chairman Sargent brought up the point that there are a lot of people on his lake, that being Old Hickory, that were renting vessels and not operating them in a safe way. And he asked me to look at what could be done to perhaps make things safer. I didn't really know the original history or the negotiated deal that kind of produced the 2005 law, so I said, well, there's a provision right here that exempts renters of watercraft. We should just delete that. And we did in 2018. And we turned right back around in 2019 and came back to the drawing board and the table to listen to those concerns of the marina owners and those that have rented watercraft. But what we still maintained at that time was that this daily safety orientation is not well defined enough in our code to give us any comfort level that people are actually administering them. We had some great marina owners and great renters of watercraft that did really good job at providing the safety orientation. They'd go through, they would test drive the boat within the marina harbor limits. There were other people that would say, here's your fire extinguisher, there's your life jackets, go have a good time. And we worked with the Marina Owners Association hand in hand in 2018 and produced a more detailed requirements as far as the information that the marina owners have to provide to a renter of watercraft. Also, the renter of watercraft now has to sign an acknowledgement that has to be kept on file with the Marina Owners Association. So I really feel like we've tightened, while we still provide special accommodation to renters, we have tightened the gap between a full-blown certified safety course and where we are now. So I provide that update with just to give you all a little background on how we got to that exemption or those special provisions for renters, and certainly can answer any questions that you have. And Betsy Woods, who is our boating safety guru and coordinator, is certainly here if there are any more specific questions or statistics. Betsy's always armed with all that information. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions the Commission has.
Thank you, Chris. Questions?
Commissioner Garner?
He's wanting somebody else to go first, what it is. He doesn't want to be first again.
Chris, is there anything on the table, so to speak, for the January session that we will be pushing forward with?
In regards to boating safety?
Yes, correct.
No, sir. Betsy will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the system that we've gotten in place in 2019 is working better than it was. There's some new technology that's available now. A lot of our renters or a lot of our livery services and marinas are now using rentalboatsafety.net, which is a vessel-specific set of videos that are available. If you're renting a pontoon boat, you go on and you watch the videos about pontoons. If you're renting a fishing boat, you go on and watch the videos about fishing boats. And then there is an actual test, albeit a limited number of questions, but a test that the operator will complete. So I really feel like we're in a pretty good situation, and I think we'll continue to kind of evaluate how this boating season went in that regard, but hopefully we're going to continue to find ways to decrease those accidents and make the waterways safer.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
We're going to take about a 5 to 10 minute break, and then we'll come back and get finished with the day. All right, I'm going to call on our captive wildlife coordinator, Walter Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. We have a preview of the amendments to Rule 1660 should be 01. There's a mistake right there, but that's fine. 18 for live wildlife. We've been working on this for some time to address some needed changes. I've worked with Mr. Moncrieve. He's done a great job in getting those in there, cleaning the rule up, editing it. Frank Fess, his shop, has contributed as well. And Thomas has been able to get us an excellent work product to present to the Commission as far as a rule on these amendments. And I'm going to do a brief summary of what they are. You should have a red line copy in your notebooks that you can read over, and I'm willing to start. Let's see. Well, there we go. One of the things is we have a requirement for all temporary exhibitors to file applications 21 days prior to their first scheduled performance. We do this for Class 1 to ensure that the folks coming in can meet the safety requirements and give an opportunity, if they can't, to make changes to their equipment. And it also, it had Class 2 in there, and these are native, not dangerous wildlife. So there's no reason to put that onus on someone that's just bringing Class 2 into the state for exhibition. So it will remain for Class 1 for safety reasons, and Class 2 wildlife will be taken out. Removing all references to native wildlife from Class 3. There's a couple of places in there. We needed to get some clarification, and by the authority under adding or deleting classes, we can do that. Thomas did a great job of putting verbiage in there to accomplish that. Once the Commission passes this, we already have a document drafted up for Commissioner Hatcher to sign, because it has to be done in conjunction with agriculture. The next is to allow facilities that rehabilitate black bear to transport these bears, as long as they stay in requirement for the Class 1 transport. Their facility is approved as a Class 1 facility, since these are bears, and they have the ability to do that. That should be able to help our field personnel when it comes to cases where we need to have a bear cub brought in for rehabilitation. And it also requires that where it goes to be done by, whether it goes to rehabilitation, to be done by TWRA personnel. Those that are probably handling the complaint or response to the situation where a bear cub is involved. And of course, Mr. Moncrieve has gone through and found lots of typos and bad sentence structures and all kinds of things, and he's done a great job of cleaning it up and even rewording some things that made more sense. So with that, if the Commission has any questions, I'll be happy to take those at this time.
Any questions? He didn't want to say that.
Is that tiger that was lost up in there in Knoxville?
Did you like that? Yeah. Betsy Woods found that for me, and she's here. She was here. She left. Betsy found that for me.
Any other questions? Any comment from the public? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I will have to say, Director Wilson, I've seen, I'd like to call him Wally in action, but I've seen him in action. In Cookeville we were there, and I watched him in action take down a guy that was illegally raising and selling white-tailed deer, and it was just impressive.
I heard he got a scholarship
to see
go
that
to North
happen.
Alabama.
So
is that
anyway,
right?
but, if y'all haven't heard that story, you definitely need to ask him about it. It is
I'll
well
let
up on his list.
You tell it. You do a better job.
Anyway, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, I'm going to call Wally Akins back up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. Before I begin, I would like to to announce and remind folks that our quail plan is out for public comment and comment from stakeholders. So we have until the end of the month to make those comments as anyone feels necessary. So just wanted to say that before I begin the presentation. I am really excited to present this information and possibly get to work with some outstanding partners. Quail Forever, both at the state level and the local level, have really come through with resources, and as well as the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, that, you know, and Smoky Mountain chapter at Quail Forever in Blount County especially has stepped up to the plate to provide some of these resources, and it truly shows their passion they have for the species. It is a request to consider a budget expansion for the Northern Bobwhite Cooperative Research Project. As y'all know, the bobwhite is our state game bird in Tennessee and was once abundant across much of the state. As recently as the 1980s, is a tremendous economical resource providing significant recreational opportunities for wildlife watchers and hunters. The decline of the bobwhite mimics a lot of other grassland bird species or bird species that are dependent on grassland, shrubland habitats. In range wide of the bobwhite, we've got about a 3.5% decline per year since 1966, but in Tennessee, we show a decline of 5% per year since that time. Causes of these declines are many, and more than likely they're interrelated to each other, but it's soon to be primarily associated with the loss of and the decline in the quality of critical early successional plant communities. Quail research of this scope and magnitude has been limited in Tennessee. Similar projects on quail population and demographics conducted in other states have been conducted in systems unlike Tennessee, such as pine systems or reclaimed strip mine areas, or in western states, which are dissimilar and inapplicable to Tennessee. In Tennessee, there's never been a year-round telemetry study of quail looking at quail survival, reproduction, and habitat use. This is a tremendous opportunity for our agency to understand and gather information of the entire life cycle of quail and the plant communities they use throughout the year, critical to their survival. This research should jumpstart our management efforts and ensure we are directing our management efforts properly, and more importantly, which habitat components are limiting. We can use this information that we hope to get not just on our quail focus areas, but also on other WMAs and private lands. Quail production can especially be affected if deficient in any one of several life cycle needs at any time of the year. Lack of any one component, such as nesting cover, brood rearing areas, or escape cover, can impact the ability of a population to grow or to be in decline. Therefore, we truly need the information on quail population demographics with the use of telemetry. We need to know precisely what quail numbers are on an area, what critical areas quail are using at different times of the year, and especially during those bottleneck or stressful periods such as late winter or late summer, and basically where they are living and how they are dying. This project will document existing habitat conditions so we can devise recommendations to improve habitat. We have our quail focal areas and our ideas on how to manage quail, but on some areas we're simply not seeing that response to quail populations that we think we should. We do have one area, Cocker Bottoms, that it's where we probably have the highest density of quail, and also the manager has sustained that population for a little over 20 years. So, you know, that provides us much hope that our efforts can be used to recover and maintain quail populations. We really need to know how to best use our resources and focus our work on creating or enhancing certain vegetation types which are needed. Lastly, this research will allow us to design and make recommendations for management no matter where we are at in Tennessee. We should be able to assess what we are doing, prioritize our needs and our resources, and learn what is and what is not working well for quail. We hope to do this research on 3 quail focal areas in Tennessee: Wolf River, which is in Region 1 and is our MBCI quail focal area, Cocker Bottoms in East Tennessee, and Bridgestone Firestone WMA on the Cumberland Plateau. By having these 3 separate areas, it should give us the ability to gain a statewide representation and a better perspective on habitat needs throughout Tennessee. This budget expansion request is a 5-year project. We hope to begin this fiscal year, if possible, and last through fiscal year 25. TWRA's contribution is $162,000 per year, which is all federal funds and matching dollars. We have matching funds to provide for this match. As I mentioned before, the Smoky Mountain chapter of Quail Forever has really stepped up and provided resources, and also the University of Tennessee Knoxville using salary and overhead reductions to contribute to the 25% match needed for this project. The total agency cost, which is a little different than the draft agenda we have, is $810,000 over a 5-year period. I appreciate the opportunity and thank you for considering this request. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Okay. I'm going to get a motion first before we start discussing it. Have a motion we accept. Have a motion from Commissioner Sanders, a second from Commissioner Granberry. Now, Commissioner Sanders, question?
Wally, the comment period's still open, correct?
That is correct, sir, yes.
So is there a good chance that maybe comments we get would cause us to want to change this before? Because I had a very long conversation with the Smoky Mountain chapter, and like Commissioner Gardner and his ducks, I'm kind of into the quail side of life. And we had a very long conversation the other day, and so I know they're sending in some comments, which are very thoughtful comments. And so I didn't know if that could affect what we're seeing here.
And are you asking change of study sites or change of just direction of overall goals and objectives?
They're commenting on this, and so that's why I didn't know. I mean, I understand what you're asking for, but I didn't know if some of the comments that are going to be coming in from the public could have an effect on what your 5-year program is.
Thank you. And the goals or objectives, those are of which I described in one of those slides, are right in line with the current draft of the quail plan. It is possible, I guess, we could, depending on what these comments are, that we take into consideration on the plan. I haven't seen all those comments yet, and certainly this project or this research is needed because we simply don't have it in Tennessee, and it's basic demographics and survival of quail, which will direct our management in the future.
Well, I know that the comments that I wrote is sitting on my desk in Chattanooga where I left them, but I will be getting those to you. And I know they were going to reach out to Commissioner Jones, who is also very interested in the quail project and what we're doing as well. So I don't know if they connected with him or not in the last few days, but they will be talking to him as well. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any comment from the public? Okay, all in favor of the budget expansion of $750,000, let me know by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Jim Ripley, we did note you as voting against it. We did hear you.
Yes, thank you. And,
Hear me? I voted yes too.
I got you all as yes. Thank you, Wally.
Thank you.
I'm going to call on our real estate and federal aid chief, Tim Churchill.
Thank you, Commissioner Holbert. Thank you, Commissioners. My budget expansion request is for this current year. It's related to an opportunity that we have at Bear Hollow Mountain Wildlife Management Area in Franklin County. It's a linking piece of property. It's about 1,100 acres between the northern component of Bear Hollow Mountain and the Pump Log Hollow unit at Bear Hollow Mountain. And this will increase the connectivity of those two areas so that hunters can and other users can
Yeah, but am I on the land? Am I
get
on
between
that?
those, and then we have that'll be a corridor for wildlife, and that's a pretty biodiverse part of the state, and so its conservation value is very high. Our partners are involved in this. The Nature Conservancy and the Open Space Institute are providing enough grant money to make the match on this. So this is 100% Pittman Robertson Wildlife Restoration request for $750,000.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion? Motion for Commissioner Sanders. Second.
Second. Kent Woods.
Got a second on Zoom from Commissioner Ripley.
Well, that was actually Kent Woods, but I second it as well. I guess that'd be a third, wouldn't it, technically? But mark it down as a second.
If I could see you, I could tell who was talking easier. You and, when you're brothers, it's hard to tell. Is there any discussion on the budget expansion for $750,000? Any comment from the public? All in favor of the Corum Tract land acquisition for the amount of $750,000, let me know by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Oh, hold on just a minute, Tim.
You're not off that easy. This is off the agenda. Off the top of your head, you may or may not know. Do we receive any PR or federal funding for boater education like we do for hunter education?
Yes, we get. It's not as good a match. It's 50-50. It's 50% state, 50% fed, but we do for boater education. It's not enough to get us through an entire year, but it gets us 3/4 of the way through.
Is it based on the number of students that participate and graduate, or is it based on volunteer time or effort?
I think it's based on. Betsy's gone, isn't she?
If you want to get back to me on that,
I would like to get back
please.
to you on that if I could.
That's fine, not a problem.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right, we got to clean up the motion on the budget expansion for the Quail Research Project. The amount's wrong on my agenda, and the actual amount is $810,000. So, does anybody have any opposition to that? Commissioner Sanders, you made the motion. Are you good with that? It's actually 810. Wally's slide showed that, but on our agenda it says 750.
I was motioning Wally's slide and not the agenda.
Okay, good deal. We'll call on Chris Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to eventually ask the commission to expand the budget for a specified purchase. But I want to invite our partner in Mike Butler and the Tennessee Wildlife Federation. They will be instrumental in this project that we're going to be asking for an expansion on, and I wanted to invite him up. Both we have Terry Lewis and the mayor from Campbell County here as well. So some folks in the audience interested in this, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike to kind of preview what we have in store.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, members of the commission. We're going to keep this short, but I want to run through. Most of you have received a lot of this information in email that went out a couple weeks ago. I do want to recognize Terry Lewis, my board member, who's been with us he's kind of like a multi-tool. He's been around for 20 plus years and he can do just about anything. And then of course we're glad to have Mayor E.L. Morton with us from Campbell County, drove over today. I would be remiss if I didn't I want to recognize Drew Losky, our new Director of Outreach. If y'all get a chance to say hello, he is the guy that's going to be traveling the state organizing sportsmen and women for us on a lot of the work that we do. I guess I've got the slide. So we're here to talk about the Hatfield Knob Wildlife Viewing Area. Several of y'all have been there and seen it, correct? You know this facility was built about 15 years ago in a partnership between the Wildlife Federation, Corum, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and the agency. And Terry Lewis spearheaded this, and he's going to speak a little bit to that here in just a second. But he spearheaded the building of it. That's the close-up. We have a wooden structure. It'll hold about 25 people. It is getting past its engineered life, frankly. And we have a little more demand than it can actually supply. And that's what they come to look at right there. That was taken in that area. He'd been rooting around, getting stuff on his antlers. If you go right now, they're tearing it up. Terry just planted all the food plots last week, and it should be getting pretty interesting. So this is broken into two phases, and what we're talking about today with the request on the budget expansion is phase one. We're going to tear down that original wooden structure, if y'all approve this, and build a new steel structure that has 2 levels, is ADA compliant, and more than doubles the capacity for visitors. And you'll see here in a second why that's important. This is the concept that I sent to you that was done by architects. Terry was great enough to get that donated, the value of the architectural plans that are stamped and the engineering plans that we have that are stamped. So that is done. That is the concept. This is the final product. You'll see it's got a ramp that meets the requirements. It's got 2 levels, so you can come in on the ground level, but it'll be put right back on the same location. Phase 2 is upgrade of the parking lot and the trail to the tower to make it compliant with ADA standards and to enhance the experience. That trail would be paved. I'm happy to report that I learned today we have a company that has agreed to donate the preliminary engineering report for this, and they may be willing to donate 30% match on an Appalachian Regional Commission grant that we're going after with the mayor. He'll speak to that just a little bit here. We think we have a funding source for phase 2 completely separate, and we have a firm, an engineering firm and construction firm that's willing to work with us on that. We want to ensure all those grades are compliant. And we want to add amenities such as, if possible, bear-proof garbage cans and restroom facilities because they're needed. In 2012, 2014, there was a 4-year project done by the University of Tennessee, paid for by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, where we wanted them to evaluate the use of the tower. That tower gets 12 to 16,000 annual visitors back then. We think that's increased a little bit. Over the 4 years of the study, here's what's really interesting. You can break it down a third, and a third. 30% of the visitors were from outside of Tennessee. 30% roughly were from outside of the local area, and the last, a little bit more than a third, were from the local area. The annual economic impact calculated by the university is on an average $1.1 million for Campbell County, which is very substantial for a rural county and a distressed county of that size. So that's my presentation. With that, I want to ask Terry to come up to the mic, if he wouldn't mind, and kind of speak to it. And you can come up here or there, whichever you prefer.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I would like to just give you a little bit of an overview of the history of Hatfield Knob and how it came to be. So back in about 2003, the agency released 11 elk on the east side of the interstate of I-75. In fairly close to where I have an 800-acre tract of land right adjacent, very close to the Hatfield Knob area. Along about the fall of 2003, some UT grad students were trying to find a mortality signal coming from a dropped collar. Or we didn't know it was a dropped collar at the time, but it was a mortality signal. So they enlisted my help because I live right there adjacent to this area. And we searched and found the collar, which was a dropped collar, which is a good thing. Never a dead elk is never a good thing. But in the process of finding that collar, we found out that the elk really liked this piece of topography. So we put up a bunch of cameras and we watched it for a while, and we noted that, you know, we were over there every weekend watching these elk. So I got with the local WMA manager, Stan Stooksbury at the time, and worked out a plan to create some food plots on this piece of topography, which is an old strip pit that had been growing up for about 25 years. So Stan said, that's fine, and he worked with me and I to create a plan, and we cleared the land with my equipment. Took about 3 years of weekends. So we cleared this land, we put some food plots out there, and the elk really took to it. So we thought it'd be great if we could share that viewing opportunity with the public. So there's a little knoll on this piece of property, and this is where we located a platform to view these elk. So we worked with the agency, and we built this tower in 2005. So we started in 2003 with the food plots. By 2005, August of 2005, we built the tower. And we created a survey, and we put in this survey box inside the tower so that anybody that come up there could fill out a little survey. That's how this study from the university came to be. So about 20,000 people or plus or minus now visit that tower, and it's amazing, it's impressive. There would be 25 people in the tower, 25 people around the fence, 25 people on the walkway getting to the tower, and 25 people in the parking lot. I mean, there's a lot of folks that visit here. So this past weekend, I also plant all the food plots and have from the beginning. The agency provides us with the seed and fertilizer and the fuel, and I use my equipment and plant the food plots. We mow the grass, all the maintenance. So anyhow, this weekend I was up there mowing and planting. Well, try to get my equipment out on a weekend because all I have is weekends. I have a JOB. So it's packed with cars. I can't hardly get my tractors and my trucks out through the parking lot because there's so many people there. So it's wonderful to see something that you work on and create get so much public attention. So it's kind of the overview of how this came to be. Now, we started with 11 elk in 2003, and there's probably 75 or 80 there now. That the herd has grown to that size. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have concerning the history of Hatfield Knob. If there's no questions, I'd like to introduce the mayor of Campbell County, E.L. Morton, County Executive.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission. Thank you for considering this effort in partnership with Campbell County. What you do for the state of Tennessee is a powerful thing. It's part of who we are. I grew up in Tennessee. I'm native of Campbell County, and this is a most unique offering. I've served on Governor Haslam's Blue Ribbon Tourism Committee as the rural representative, and Governor Lee reappointed me there as well. We are a tourism community. That was a coal mine. That was a coal mining community, but it's no longer. It may come back in some form in the future, but tourism is our largest industry. And so the impact that you're going to make with a decision to support this supports a community that was on the distressed list, but as our elk tower has continued to attract, we moved to the at-risk list. So we are seeing some economic improvement, but we got a long way to go. With a two-phased approach, with the building of the tower, the ADA compliance, and then the potential for an Appalachian Regional Commission grant, we're going to be actually stacking on top of another ARC grant, and our county's about 2 months away from letting contract for $475 $1,000 broadband build through Stinky Creek, which is really close to this tower. So at one end of that broadband project is Elk Valley Elementary School, and their mascot is the elk. They had a group of students that built a mural that hangs in the Campbell County Courthouse of a bull elk right in front of our courtrooms or new Justice Center. They were designated a Tennessee STEM school last year, one of 11. And it's a K-8 that is one of our most distant schools. Very expensive to run, but it's a 2-hour bus ride if you don't have it. So we've got big pieces of our community tied to this elk project. Our children are involved with it. Our chamber is involved with it. Before I became the mayor, I was chamber director. And so I started working with Terry, and we worked a piece through the legislature to actually designate Campbell County as the elk capital of Tennessee. And so we're extremely proud of it. It's had a huge impact. It's continuing to grow. We, as a coal mining community, lots of people from around the world had opinions about what was happening right and wrong in our community. This is a conservation statement that we do it right and we do it well and we do it with you. And so very proud of what's happened here. Terry Lewis is the backbone of so much good effort that goes into this project and so many others. But we call on you and ask you for your support today, and thank you for everything that you do. Subject to your questions.
Any questions for Mayor Horton? All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Chris?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. That brings me back. I'm first to ask if there's any questions for the agency in regard to the project, but that was a bang-up job by a group of 3 there to kind of explain to you what we're doing. Certainly, you know, the potential for positive economic impact to our distressed or at-risk counties is Executive Order number 1 for the Lee administration, and we want to do our part to support those efforts. And this project fits squarely within that. Thanks to Mike Butler's efforts and the efforts of the foundation, the budget expansion that we are requesting in the amount of $96,500 would all be federal funds. Mike and Cora and Terry and others have found ways to make the match on that project. So that is the request from the agency, and pending any questions, we'd ask for approval.
All right. I'm going to call on Kent Woods. Just a second. Kent?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate everybody's work on this and everything, and I would like to make a motion that we approve this since it's in my district, and like I say, I know there's been a lot of effort put into these plans, and I look forward to seeing this built.
Gotcha.
I'll second it.
I got a second too.
You didn't even have to ask for it.
That was Commissioner Jones on the second. Any questions? Commissioner Granberry?
Chris, with this budget expansion, is this phase 1 and phase 2 100% funded?
No, sir. This is we'll fund phase 1, which is the construction of the new tower. Phase 2, Mike and others in the county are working diligently to acquire that funding from other sources. Certainly, I think if a need arises, we'll hear from them again, and we could evaluate that at this time. This budget expansion will be limited to the construction of the new tower and the tearing down of the old tower.
And looking out a little bit, is 1 enough?
I believe that the tower and its proposed, the proposed tower, doubling, perhaps even tripling the accommodation that's there currently, I think that this is a good place to start, and we certainly continue to evaluate the need as we move forward.
You might ask the engineers if we could duplicate the plans in another location pending structural, so we wouldn't have to redo that at the later date.
That's a great suggestion. Thanks, sir.
Commissioner Sanders?
Yeah, I want to say I was up there in July and had the advantage of being taken around by the Bear project manager. But I really would encourage phase 2 because I think that'd be awesome to see that. Phase 1, definitely the tower needs to be redone after all these years. And that was just being there and seeing that, I'm like, wow, I didn't know this was coming up. So it was good to see this. And in phase 2, the access, because as we were riding up to the tower, I could see how access for a lot of people would be impossible. So that'd be great to see if we can.
I certainly have to stop along the way walking up there myself, so it's not an easy climb.
I was in a Ranger, so I didn't have to stop, but I could see how you would have to.
Any other questions? Commissioner Tommy Woods?
So if the expansion's approved, what's the timing on the project?
So the way that we would proceed, we're looking to administer this money on a grant basis. We want to streamline and be as efficient as we can with taking out some of the state process, and the best plan that we have identified at this point, I think, will be working with the county and perhaps the Chamber of Commerce there in Campbell County to accept the grant money, and I would think that construction could start fairly immediately. I've got them both nodding their heads there.
Okay, so I would imagine the peak usage is around the rut of the elk in the fall. So
I don't know that we're going to make it for this season, but getting a jump start on it this fall is certainly going to put us in the best position to be ready for the peak use next year.
Right. So I noticed in the proposal, item 1 was tear down the old tower. So
yes,
I suggest that we do all we can beforehand, before that.
It's going to take some time for this money to be processed and put in our budget, and then it would take a minimum, look at our attorney Thomas, but a minimum of probably 30 to 45 days to get a contract executed.
Right. I hate to mention the obvious, but sometimes when you don't, it's like, well, the first thing they done was tear the tower down, and now the other one's not built, and it's peak season, and we don't have one.
I would guess we'd be looking at a November 1st or later time frame to start this contract.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Commissioner Box?
It's kind of long of my question is, I guess it'd be completely closed during the construction?
The old one, as soon as the old one's not there, it'll be closed.
The whole area will be, you think, for viewing?
That's a good question, and one I'd probably have to discuss with the area manager. I would think that certainly we don't want any kind of anything to disrupt people from viewing the area. The tower itself and that specific footprint will be disrupted and closed, but I would not think that it would be necessary to keep people away from Hatfield Knob entirely during the construction.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I guess the option was explored about building a new tower and then tearing down the old one. It's just this spot is where the tower has to go.
By all accounts, it is the best spot.
This is the only spot.
Grading and viewing and everything else,
Okay.
it just seems to be the most appropriate.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Gardner?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for the volunteer effort for Mr. Terry Lewis. You've obviously put in some serious time up there to make all this happen, that people like us can come up there and enjoy it, and out-of-state folks can too. And that's very impressive, the amount of time and effort you've put into it. I'm really glad to see it's going to be a steel structure. It's going to be something that's more weather resistant. We're going to get more than 15 years out of it. So the investment on this is going to be well worth it. And thanks to Mike Butler and Mayor, we appreciate everything y'all are doing, and look forward to seeing this completed. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any comment from the public? Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor of the budget expansion of $96,500 for the elk viewing tower, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission.
Okay, we'll call on Ken Tarkington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your booklets, I believe there's a 2-pager. The screen has a little bit different presentation, looks a little bit better than what we've had perhaps in the past. Same information, same figures, and so forth. I'm reporting through the month of July. Accounts closed August yesterday. Finance Administration closed it, but it was not enough time to update this report. So I'll be reporting through the month of July of 2020. On the boating side, the registration
income is approximately $339,000 more than the previous year, or more than projected. The expense to total budget is down somewhat, basically because of COVID, of 2.3%. In the middle of the page, the Wildlife Fund, we're above projection with license sales of approximately $1.1 million. And our expense to total budget for the year is 3.6%. There were no transactions posted during the month of July for wetlands, and its balance is currently $14,354,000. The last, I think there's probably 3 or 4 slides. You can run them all through and put them all up there at one time. These are the Treasury funds, or the investment, rather, funds that the Treasury has invested for us. The year-to-date amount is almost 0.3%. The SPIF, the State Pool Investment Fund earning, is 0.38%. Any questions or comments?
I don't see any, Ken.
Okey-doke.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Sanders, I think you got something to talk. You told me to call on you.
As much as I hate to do this, Commissioner McLaren and I went and shot at the Farm Bureau Shoot Hunger, is that right? 2020, before today's meeting. And I hate the fact that he actually outshot me, but I have to say it because he actually did. Especially after I told you last night that he wouldn't even get close to my score. He outshot me. So, but we did have a good time, and for a great cause, shooting in the rain. But it was fun to get out, and they had a good turnout, and so I was glad we could be there to represent the commission. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanders. I know Joe McKinnon, you drove over from the shoot too, so I think you stayed and eat brisket though. No, oh, y'all stayed too? We didn't eat brisket. We appreciate you bringing it on over.
I would like to point out everyone was invited.
True. Any other comments from the Commissioner? Any comment from the public? Director Wilson? No comment. Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming. We're adjourned.